Hi everyone, and welcome back to That Random Geeky Guy. Today I've got what I think is quite a cool video, something I've been doing a bit of preparation for, and hopefully we'll get some pretty cool results. So I don't know whether or not all of this stuff that's sat in front of me here will mean anything to anybody, but I guess let me dig into it and explain what it is that we're doing today. So today we are making custom keycaps. So for those of you that don't know, a vast majority of mechanical keyboards, you can remove the keycaps. You can buy different keycap sets. You can get them from places like Amazon, eBay, and other distributors worldwide. But you can actually make custom ones. Now, I kind of got into this idea and kind of thought about it with some inspiration from some other videos. I want to give a shout out to Random Frank P. He does some great keyboard stuff and was kind of a bit of an influence in me thinking, right, this is a good idea. Let's see how difficult it is. So there's been a lot of kind of trial runs of this before I've been in front of the camera to talk to you guys about it. And actually, once you kind of get the method down, it's actually really easy. It's just making sure that you get the method right. So what are you going to need to make your own custom keycaps? I guess the first things first is to find out what stems there are on your switches on your keyboard. So my keyboard is a Corsair K65 Alu-X. And it's got cherry red switches. So actually it's just the normal cross pole that you see on a lot of keyboards. But some switches are different. Razer is one that stands out to me. And there's some other ones out there. So make sure you check that out first before you look into actually making your own custom keycaps. The reason being is you're going to have to buy some of these. Now these are silicone molds. So these silicone molds are designed for all different key lengths, widths, heights, so on and so forth. So you can, if you wish to, make a whole full set of custom keycaps. In this particular demo, we're actually just going to be changing the escape key to something that's custom. And I think that's quite cool because if you just want to have that like little custom touch, the escape key is a great one to do. So yes, you'll be buying silicone molds, and in the top of the silicone mold is essentially the reverse imprint of what you'd be expecting in terms of the switch pole and the way it connects the keycap to the switch. So you need to make sure that this is right and that it suits your specific keyboard. Anyway, so yeah, after some trial and error, I've kind of got to a position where I can confidently, probably famous last words, actually produce some really good quality keycaps using a resin mix. So for those of you that haven't seen resin being used before, it's really, really popular in all sorts of kind of arts and crafts, from making custom furniture to custom jewelry, that sort of stuff. And actually it is so suited to this specific project. There isn't really an alternative that I'd recommend. I think this is great. Essentially, you've got two liquids. Now, my understanding is you've got the core liquid, which is this one here. It's on the actual label, it says Part A. And then you've got what I'm going to call the activator. So it's what activates this liquid, which is called Part B. Don't worry, for this stuff and everything else that you see featured here in the video, I will put some links below. They are Amazon affiliate links, so we do get a bit of a kickback, so I'd appreciate if you were to use them. But I'll get some links below so you can get kind of the right stuff. You actually don't need as much as you might think to make keycaps. These bottles, it's really difficult to pick up on camera, but like they're less than a quarter gone. And I've done loads of demo runs with this just to try and make sure that we get this stuff right. And then you've got to think about, right, okay, so when you mix these, by the way, it's 2 parts of the normal liquid to 1 part of the activator. That's quite important. And there's another important bit that I'll kind of cover a little bit later. You have to think about your design and what it is that you're going to do and what it is that you want to build in. So the easiest and quickest solutions, glitter is a perfect example. Make sure you get a real fine glitter. So here I've got 2 little tubs of glitter. It's a blue and a green. So for those of you who've been following my channel for some time, you'll know that I use the color theme blue and green quite a lot. So obviously this fits quite well with me. But then there's also these little baggies of powder. Don't worry, I haven't crossed the realm into something that's illegal. This stuff is essentially a pigment. So it's a pigment powder, or pearls as they're also known, that can go into the resin. Now these specific ones are actually glow in the dark. So there's a blue glow and a green glow. And throughout my testing on this, the green glow is a very traditional glow in the dark. It's kind of things that you'll have seen many times before. The glue's very cool. Okay, and then the way that you actually put this together gets a really, really good effect. Okay, so what I want to talk about before we actually get into it and actually doing it is essentially the methods that I have learned. So One method is that you can mix these components together. I've got a little kind of thimble here that you can then put the liquid into and then pour into your keycaps, and you can pour it in essentially its clear state. Then you can add a bit of each of your glitter or whatever else that you wanted to do, slightly mix it up so it kind of just gets like a little twirl within it, or really mix it up so it's kind of mixed in, so on and so forth. But when you fill that keycap completely, what you've got to remember is any component that you put in the resin that is heavier than the resin will eventually sink down to the bottom. So factor that in and bear that in mind, okay? So that is always going to create that effect of at the bottom, which then becomes the top of the keycap, you'll get where your glitter builds up. So that's something just to bear in mind. Now, for the particular design I'm going to do today, that's actually the effect I want, and I'll explain that in a moment. If you wanted to actually have things more sustained throughout, you can do multiple pours. So that's where you'll pour a little bit, mix in whatever it is you want to mix in, and then wait and allow it to set a certain amount. Then you can pour another layer, do the same again, kind of rinse and repeat, and you'll then get layering throughout, which is, you know, and also quite a useful method. The other thing as well, if you're actually going to be doing a large selection of keycaps, is actually to mix it all in this kind of crucible. So actually put all of your components, your glitter, your pigment. Obviously, you can get color pigments as well. So if you wanted to kind of color the resin, you could do that. And that's just basically searching for pigments of the colors you want. They can be quite expensive, so just bear that in mind. But anyway, you can put them all in here, mix it all up in one, and then pour it in. But bear in mind, again, any heavy component is going to sink to the bottom and be the top of the keycap, unless you were to do that kind of layering effect. So just kind of bear that in mind. Now, I'm using these glowing pigments along with the glitter, and I'm doing it all in one pour in that method I've just said, because I want the glitter, I want that to actually accumulate near the top of the key, because that's going to have a great effect. Because then I'm going to use the blue glow and make sure it's mixed in properly. And what happens then is that, providing you mix it correctly, that pigment completely infiltrates all of the resin. So you end up with the top of the keycap looking really good with a good glitter effect, and then the rest of the keycap being glow in the dark. So it's, in my opinion, quite a cool effect. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's actually get this started, and I'll show you how it works. So like I said, mix-wise, from the core part of the product, so part A, you're going to be using twice as much of this to every part of B. Now, what I learned from the testing, one of the things I learned, should I say, is mixing it is really important. So I've got a scale here, and I'm going to put together some of this. So we'll just pop this on. Make sure you zero out the scale with the actual crucible on the scale. So it's now set to 0. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour some of this in, which I say is the normal resin components. And whatever I put in here, I've got to put half again of that activator. So I'm going to pour into here 4 grams. So that's 4 grams of part A. This is only going to make a couple of keycaps, so just bear that in mind. If you were doing more, you would make more. So there we go. That is 4 grams. So essentially that means then with the activator, I've got to put in another 2 grams, taking it to 6 grams for there to be the right mix of the two products. So here we go. In with this, and say this is going to take it up from 4 grams to 6 grams. It's why it's really important that you zero it out with the crucible on there before you start pouring this stuff in. And then once we've hit that 6 grams, there we go, the real important next step comes. So this is what I learned through the testing, that you've got to make sure that you get it right. I've got some implements here. So there are 2 little kind of scoops, which can be used to put your components in, and then there's also a kind of a mixing stick here as well. So we're going to be using the mixing stick now to mix these 2 components together. Now this part is really important. You need to make sure that you properly mix these components together. On the very first test I ever did, I didn't mix them enough. I kind of mixed it for 30 seconds and that was it. That's nowhere near enough. You've got to mix it for at least 3 minutes. And that's constant mixing, scooping around the sides, making sure you're mixing those 2 products together really well. So let me get mixing. Okay, so we've been mixing now for 3 minutes. This is famous last words, but this should all now be mixing really well in terms of the resin component and the activator. Now, because of the method that I'm using for this particular pour, we're going to be mixing everything in the crucible here. So I've got the green glitter, the blue glitter, as well as the blue glow pearl or the blue glow pigment, which will make it glow in the dark. Now, bear in mind, you are only limited really by the size of the keycap and your imagination in terms of what you want to do with this. If I was to just pour that resin in now, I would just get a clear keycap. But if you wanted to, you could use vinyl stickers. So you could put a vinyl sticker inside the resin and let it set. Obviously, you could print any design you wish onto that. You could put an item in there, providing it fits in the small amount of resin that you've got. You could do anything you want because it will be sealed in that resin. Just bear in mind, if you add color pigment, it's going to be less transparent and become more opaque. So just factor that in terms of your design. But essentially, it's trial and error. See what you can achieve. This stuff isn't massively expensive. So you can have fun with it and just see what you can kind of pull off. And in that factor, actually, these two molds that we've got here, this is a normal keycap mold. So you can see you've got just normal keycaps and you've also got a shift keycap there as well. I've also got ones with space bars and all those sort of bits and pieces. But this one is a little bit different. It's actually got paw prints in it. So when you actually completely set the key in this and you take it out, you end up with a paw print on top, which is a bit random. It's a bit different. And you can get all different ones. So it's whatever kind of suits the design and the plan that you're going for. Anyway, no more talking. Let's start building the mix completely. So I'm going to start with some of this green glitter. Now, for those of you who haven't used glitter before, be very careful, because if you get it anywhere, it just makes an absolute mess and you'll be finding glitter for months. So here we go. So we've got green glitter going in first. What I'm going to do here is with our little scoop, I'm going to add a leveled off 2 scoops of the green, like so. And then I'm going to do the same again with the blue. So bear in mind and factor in, because of the weight of this glitter, once it's in the molds to set, it's going to sink to the bottom, which will then become the top of the keycap. But that's what I'm trying to achieve. That's important. So here we go again. So 2 of these. Like I said, if you're using glitter, I suggest you try and find the finest glitter you can, just because we aren't dealing with a very big area here. So big chunks of glitter, unless that's the design you're going for, is going to be kind of really obvious. So next up, we have got this blue pigment, which is going to be the glow in the dark blue. With this, I'm also going to be adding, because I want to make sure it's got a nice amount in there, because we are doing more than one key with this solution, is I'm going to put in 2 large scoops of this pigment into here. So 1 and 2. Okay. Drop any excess back into there. The reason being is this stuff is quite expensive per weight. And then I'm afraid it's the mixing thing again. Luckily, this isn't for 3 minutes. This is just mixing it in so you can see that it's nicely mixed into the solution. So there we go. Now, bear in mind, whatever the consistency or whatever the look looks like in this, that isn't going to be the finished product, because we're doing it as one big pour. Like I said, the glitter is going to sink to the bottom, but that's the effect that I'm looking for. Right, so let's make sure that's nicely in. Now, the big reason why I'm doing quite an intensive mix on this is actually more because of that glow-in-the-dark pigment. I want that to be properly mixed into the resin. And if mixed properly, that won't sink to the bottom. And like I say, you'll create that glow-in-the-dark effect across the rest of the keycap, which looks really cool. Don't forget as well, like the keyboard I use is RGB. So because it's a resin, and even if it's slightly opaque or even translucent, obviously that RGB is still going to shine perfectly through. Anyway, so that's all nicely mixed together. And then we come to the pour. Now, like I say, this is the easiest method in the fact that it's just pour it in. Whereas obviously if you are trying to make sure that you can get a nice spread of whatever material it is you're putting into the resin, you do have to do that multi-pour. So kind of pour a bit, let it set, pour a bit, let it set, so on and so forth. But like I say, this is the method that's working for my design. So there we go. That's all mixed. Now, when you do pour it, there's 2 major things that you need to watch out for. So number 1 is when you are pouring it, you actually want to completely fill it, which I know might seem strange because you're then about to plunge this down into it, which is going to make it overflow slightly. But it is much easier to have it slightly overflow and set and just cut those pieces off, which is really easy to do with a sharp craft knife, versus when it sets, it's shrinking slightly and you ending up with air bubbles around the top and it just looks awful. So that's from my kind of trial and error. Fill it to the top. It's better to make a mess and end up with a better product in the end than to be worried about it overflowing and then end up with a product that has shrunk and you've kind of got air bubbles on the corners, so on and so forth. So, right, let's make sure that we've got this the right way round. It's also quite important that when you end up putting this cap back on once it's full, that the mold that's pushing down inside is centered. Otherwise, your edges of your keycap, they'll be offlined and it won't line up properly on top of your keycap. But anyway, let's dig into this. Let's get it done. Okay, so just make sure that there's nothing in your mold, because obviously if there's anything left in it from a previous design or anything like that, that's going to end up in your new one as well. So that's all clean, and then we pour. So all quite simple to this stage. A nice slow pour. This is the one with the dog footprint on it, or dog paw as opposed to paw. Nice and slow, just to make sure it all fills properly. And once this is right near the top, before you put the mold on, what's really important to do is on the corresponding connector, which is going to go onto your cross pin on top of your mechanical switch, is to pour a little bit of resin on top of there. It will bubble up on top. When you pour that little bit on, get the mixing tool that we used earlier and just push it down into that mold. This creates the very, very best connection when you actually come to put it onto your keyboards. Without doing this, you can end up with a perfect keycap with no connector on it, because that solution hasn't made its way into this part of the mold. So make sure you prod that all down so there's a good ample amount of that resin down in there, creating that stem connector. And then very quickly, turn it over and place it into the mold. So you can see straight away that's gone up and over the edges, which is exactly what I want. What I'm doing now is I'm looking down into the mold to make sure that everything is perfectly lined up and all the edges are fine. Obviously, if we're doing a lot of keycaps, I could fill all of these, but I'm only doing one, so I'm just doing the escape key. And believe it or not, that's it. That's done. So what we now need to do is leave this for 24 to 48 hours to completely solidify. If you've done the mix right at the start, so you've properly done it for 3 minutes and really mixed it up, it will set perfectly and it'll be rock hard and an absolute perfect keycap. When you pull it out, you just need to take off these excesses. It will either just snap off because it's very thin around the top, or you can just cut it with, like I say, with a sharp knife, and that's ready to go. Now, let's just do it one more time, because I'm doing, say, 2 keycaps with this one, and this particular keycap is just a normal keycap as opposed to the dog paw. So here we go. Let's put the resin in again. So exactly the same process. We're going to run that all the way to the top. We do not mind that it's going to overflow when we put the cap on. There we go. And exactly the same as before, this is an important part. Make sure that you put a bubble of resin on here. There we go. And then use your mixing stick to push that down into the connector that connects onto the stem on top of your mechanical key. All right, here we go. So I'm just spreading that all out, making sure that it's all in there to create the perfect connector to go onto the post. And there we go. That should, a bit more for luck, that should be fine. Then exactly the same process, we're just going to turn that over, pop it straight down on there. It's going to overflow straight away because we've got way too much in there, but it's going to produce a better result in the end by doing it this way. And then just perfectly line everything up so that each of the 4 walls of the key are equal. And literally, that is it. What I do advise that can be a benefit is that on top of these, you just put a little bit of weight. A socket from a socket set is a good choice, or anything else that's just got a little bit of weight that can just go on there and just keep that down so you get a nice flat surface. Other than that, it's just letting time take its course. So let's put these to the side and let me show you some of the end results. Okay, so here are some of the finished keycaps. Here we've got one of the paw ones. This particular one has a pink and purple design. I've made this for somebody else. You can see if we turn that over, we've got the perfect connector on the bottom. Everything's all square, everything's all nice, and it's hard. This is a slightly different design. So this particular one, you can see there is some, with the glitter there at the top, there's actually some of the glow-in-the-dark pigments, which I intentionally didn't mix in. And it creates, at night, it creates a bit of like a galaxy effect, which I think looks quite cool. And you can see that the actual resin underneath is quite clear because I've not mixed a huge amount of the pigment into the resin. It's all sunk and in there. Then we've got this one, which is the blue and green. And you can notice the resin on this has a blue tinge to it, or greeny tinge, because that has got the glow-in-the-dark pigment heavily mixed in. And then there's a square normal keycap here with exactly the same design. So there you go. That's making custom keycaps using resin. I hope you guys will agree. It's actually quite easy. It isn't too difficult. And I'm really happy with the results that you kind of get from it. You've got to be patient. That's important. Make sure that you've let it set before you remove it from the mold. And in addition to that, it's making sure you mix things properly. But other than that, it's just getting creative. It's about creating something that's unique and something specific for your build, whatever that might look like. I like these. I think they're awesome. If it's something that you guys want to do, or if you've got any questions about making your own custom keycaps, stick it in the comment section below. Don't forget to head on over to thatrandomgeekyguy.com. Pick up one of these Founder Edition t-shirts. It allows videos like this to take place. It supports the channel. Would really appreciate it. Other than that, you will find in the video description links to the products that we've used here today to create these custom keycaps. Again, they are Amazon paid affiliate links, so if you do use them, we do get a bit of a kickback. But ultimately, if you're planning to do the project, why not support the channel? Other than that, make sure that you subscribe, make sure you hit that bell button, give us a thumbs up if you like this video, thumbs down if you dislike it. Make sure you share it. Let's get some more custom PC work going. And I think custom PC keycaps is a great place to start. Thanks very much for tuning in, guys. I'm Ryan from That Random Geeky Guy, and I'll see you next time.